These aren't just two musical pieces attached to each other. This puzzle is named Cast Harmony, and the goal is to remove them from one another. You can actually do this in 2 harmonious moves. This puzzle does mess with your mind a bit, as it doesn't easily fit through the inner spiral, and it does fit over top of the G clef. It makes you think it should go over this somehow, but the actual 2-step solution is much more simple than this. Instead of pushing it through, we need to think a little more differently. Once we have it in this position, we need to figure out a way to keep moving it down. And when we find out that it can't go left or right, we see there's a little bit of space for it to fit through, so we align it and get it ready for our second move. Once it's oriented, and once that move is done, we just have to maneuver it around a little bit more, and this puzzle is solved. That's about it. See ya. This is a double-sided maze puzzle, and it will have you going circles unless you know the trick. The goal here is to separate 2 pieces of metal from one another, but every time you think you get it, you realize it won't quite fit. This puzzle gets its name from the way it looks, and also the pattern you need to use in order to solve it. You need to spin the pieces around each other in order to get the buttons in a very specific hole. And once we have everything aligned properly, the snowflake breaks into 2 pieces. What'd you think, easy or hard? See ya. Hours can be put into cracking this puzzle, but if you know anything about loop logic, it'll only take a mere seconds. The name of this puzzle is Mirror's Image, and the goal is to remove this cone piece. It would be much easier if it didn't have this ball and string running through the middle of it, but since it does, we need to use a little trick. The first of 3 steps is to set up the ring, so we slide the ring through the cone piece so that we just have the strings to work with. The second step is to position everything correctly. Now you may already see what's going on, but if you don't, soon you'll see. The third and final step is the execution. The reason why this one is so cool is because rather than trying to get the ball through the piece we need to remove, we are able to slide that cone piece over everything else instead. This isn't exactly the first thing you would try when trying to solve this puzzle, which is why its difficulty rating is 9 out of 10. Let me know if you agree. See ya. You can spend hours doing circles in this puzzle. Its name is Cast U and U, and there's a bit of a trick to it. I'll show you, but first we need to slide down 1 nut on each of these U-bolts. Once this is done, we loosen one of the nuts to allow it to wiggle back and forth, and in a very specific position, the other U-bolt can cross over. 3 out of the 4 nuts have one side that's shaved, and this is what allows us to be able to slide these 2 pieces apart. Once we twist and combine the 2 U-bolts, we need to move the other nuts in the correct position. You might not be able to see it in the video, but each of these 2 nuts has one side that's slightly smaller, and lining it up is not so easy. If we are patient enough, we'll go back and forth a few times, and eventually we'll hear a snap. And that just means the U-bolts are sliding out for each other. And once enough room is made, it is officially detached. Last thing there is to do is to move one of the nuts all the way to the top and the bottom nut all the way to the bottom. We do have to go back and forth a couple times, but it is worth it. The last thing to do after we have all the nuts in the correct spot is to wiggle it until it pops off. And this is how you disassemble the Cast U and U. See ya. These 3 keys and container make up a Grandmaster puzzle by Hanayama called Cast Key 3. All 3 of these keys have wedges in different areas, which makes it extremely difficult to get them all out and back in, and it all starts with getting out that back key. Once the back key is out, we can move the mid key all the way down there too. There's some specific moves that the front 2 keys have to make in order to get them into a position where it lines all 3 of them up on the top. At this point, we have the complex move of moving the middle key inward while we move both the other keys out. Once the triple heel move is done, we have to push and pull the front 2 keys quite a bit more in order to align them properly. And once everything's aligned properly, we can move the front key and the back key out to its maximum position, and the only thing we have left to do is move that mid out as well. To do this, we have to use the key as a toggle. It can only be one of 2 positions, and it has to go back and forth in order to get the mid key as far out as possible. As you can hear by all that clicking, we have to keep moving that back key back and forth as we move the mid key closer and closer to its exit. And with a quick check, we can see that all keys are by their exits, and this puzzle is solved. See ya. This wire brain teaser has the goal of removing this handle, but these 2 gold diamonds make it seemingly impossible. But using a little bit of loop logic, this just becomes another loop puzzle. As we move the left diamond into the middle of the puzzle, we have to continually move the silver handle to the right. The next part is definitely the most challenging. We have to align the right diamond to not only go through the left diamond, but to also go through the silver handle. It takes some practice, but after we get everything lined up correctly, it should just slide right into position. After we pull up on the silver handle, it becomes sandwiched between the 2 diamonds. The handle has to go from the top to the bottom, and the way we do that is by pushing the diamond through the handle, but it has to be in the middle of it, otherwise there's not enough wiggle room. This next part is my favorite. We have to go in and out to break it free of the diamond, and then go in and out again, but this time through both diamonds. And that allows us to free the handle and the diamond. See ya. Challenge behind this metal pound is direction. There is one single step to this in order to solve it, and I'll show you, but first, you need to think outside the box. This puzzle makes us think in terms of up, down, and side to side. We may forget that we can rotate it as well. And rotating it is a part of the single step solution with which once you get it, you will not forget. After we rotate the right ones and peel the pieces apart, the only thing left to do is put it back together. See ya. The G clef and eighth note wrap around each other to form a puzzle. We can do it in merely 2 moves, but we first need to set everything up. The setup is to wrap the eighth note around the bottom of the G clef, but it needs to be a specific way, otherwise it won't work. So the way we actually need to put it in is to take the top of the eighth note and stab it inwards towards the G clef. This gets the eighth note inside of the G clef, which gets us ready for our first move. After getting the silver piece in the correct orientation, all we need to do is pull it up through the gold piece. The second move is pretty seamless, as all we need to do is push it up upside down. The last move is to rearrange it just a little bit to make it look exactly the same as when we got it. See ya. These cold metal pieces are really just 2 mazes that look a lot like snowflakes. They each have a little button that goes into each other, and the trick to this one is in its name, and that is cast snow. As you can see, these buttons don't just go into any hole, but they go into a very specific hole. Once we get them back together, we need to get the buttons into the middle of each one of the metal plates. And the way we do that is by rotating the 2 metal pieces around each other, followed by sliding them into each other a little bit, and then some more rotating. Once we get the buttons back into the middle, we're going to have to move them into some different arms to reset the puzzle. And it's only after the puzzle is reset do we notice that we move the pieces back and forth like snow falling from the sky. That's about it. See ya. In order to make this puzzle, we need to connect these 2 pieces in such a way that makes it difficult to take apart. If you're clever enough, you might even be able to see what we need to do, and it would only take a few seconds. The core idea here is to get the cone piece right beside the green ball, but to do that, 3 things need to be done. The first thing to do is to push the comb over the circle, which gets us around that string, and we can then just follow the string all the way to the top. After we get the comb over the first part, you'll see how we follow the string as a guide. The second step is to make sure that ball is pushed through that circle so it creates a loop with which we're going to push the comb over top of. You'll see that now through that circle, there's only 2 strings attached to that green ball. After we have created that loop on that top ring, the final step is to push the comb all the way through everything so that it meets up with that green ball and they're side by side. This puzzle is technically put back together, but we can even go one step further and shift things around a little bit to make it more difficult to solve. If we can get the green ball to the middle, it becomes less obvious that the green ball is what we use to create the loop with which the comb has to go over top of. Now this puzzle should be nice and challenging. See ya. These are not just random nuts and bolts. This is a puzzle, and the goal is to put these 2 U-bolts back together with these nuts. It isn't as easy as you think unless you know the tricks. See, it looks like all these nuts are the exact same, and that's far from the truth. Once we get these 2 nuts into position, we will then see that some of these nuts have shaved sides, which is key in sliding them back together. As we can see on this top right nut that it is slightly misshaped. Let's make sure it's facing inward, and we have to do the exact same thing on the other side. Some of these can be a lot more challenging than the other ones because the differences are so minuscule. But after we find the right side, it's just about aligning them and then pushing the U-bolts together. After we barely get them together, we notice that we need to move both of the nuts on the inside together to allow the U-bolts to connect. This involves making enough space so that the bottom of one U-bolt can fit between 2 nuts on the other U-bolt. And after enough twisting, the U-bolt should slip right in between the 2 nuts. Once this is done, there's only one more trick that you have to know. A very specific spot on the one U-bolt is also shaved. And that's what allowed us to finally put this thing back together. That's about it. See ya. Would having a lock with 3 keys be better or worse than having a lock with 1 key? These 3 keys in tiny container go together to form a puzzle called Castkey 3. It is a Grandmaster puzzle as it has the maximum difficulty ranking. This would be much easier if all 3 keys were exactly the same, but the catch is that all 3 keys are different, and that makes it a little more difficult. Although I'm sure a lot of you guys would breeze right through this, it took me a minute to learn all the moves. Like right now, all we're doing is getting the mid piece back in so that we can get that front piece back in as well. Once that's done, we have to maneuver the front 2 keys around so that we can get all 3 lined up on the top. With enough pushing and pulling, we get all 3 lined up at the top, and that means we can push the back key in by 1 more slot. Now, even though we just push the back key back in, we have to slightly move it back out so that everything else will move. After we get that middle key pushed back in, we can push the back key in a little bit more, and just before you think you solved it, you actually have to pull everything back out by 1 notch in order to line everything up and push it all back in. Then when everything is aligned, we can push that back key back in all the way, and then we can push the front key back in all the way, followed by the mid key. I think I prefer 1 key. See ya. This wire puzzle is called Brontosaurus, and we need to put it back together. We will be needing some loop logic on this one just to prevent it from getting locked up anywhere. The first goal is to get the handle in a position where it's sandwiched between the 2 diamonds. The way we do that is to go in and out through both diamonds and then back in and out through a single diamond. And now that the handle is sandwiched on the bottom, we actually need to twist it so it's sandwiched at the top. The diamond on the right is going to have to be wedged into the handle in order to have the handle sandwiched between the 2 diamonds. The most challenging step is next. We have to arrange it in a way where the handle and the left diamond go through the diamond on the right. The hardest part here is the alignment. If you don't align it correctly, it can become very challenging to push it through, but if you align it correctly, it just slides right in. Once that's done, we have to bring the handle all the way around, so it starts with getting all the way down to the bottom right. And as we're moving along, you can see that the diamond is still attached. The last step, and seemingly the hardest, is to maneuver it around to get that left diamond over top of that left dip. Once that's done, this is fully reassembled. See ya. These 4 metal pieces fit together to create a puzzle in the form of a hashtag. It may look difficult, but I'm going to show you the single step you need. If you take a closer look at this one, you'll see that both sides are fairly symmetrical. The challenge of this puzzle is the design, and it gets you to think in the ups and downs and lefts and rights when you should be thinking about the diagonals. Once we get these pieces put back together diagonally, this puzzle is reassembled and ready to go. See ya.